The SEGA Dreamcast, one of my favorite consoles of all time, unfortunately suffered a short life, living in the shadow of what would become the best-selling console of all time, the PlayStation 2. Despite this, the Dreamcast holds a special place in my heart, having owned this console since the holiday season following its launch. It saddened me that it met its demise so early. Recently, however, there have been many mods that have sought to modernize and renew the Dreamcast experience for a new generation of gamers to enjoy. Today, we're going to look at those mods and in the process attempt to build the ultimate SEGA Dreamcast. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Tito and welcome to another episode of Retro Renew. Today we're going to be looking at the SEGA Dreamcast and some of the many incredible mods that are available to us today. Now, as I mentioned in the intro of this video, the Dreamcast is one of my favorite home consoles ever. Some of my fondest memories were made on the Dreamcast with titles like Sonic Adventure, Shenmue, and Resident Evil Code Veronica. So if you're a big fan of the Dreamcast too, hit that like button and let me know what your favorite title is in the comment section below. So a lot of the mods available today I'll actually be installing into this very Dreamcast console, which I bought for only $25. And by the time I'm done with it, the only original part remaining will be the motherboard. Everything else will be replaced. Now, due to the sheer number of mods I'll be doing to the console, I'll be making this a two-part miniseries. Speaking of which, let's briefly go over each of the mods I'll be doing. The first two, which will be the focus of this part 1 video, is adding native digital video and audio output through HDMI via the DCDigital. This mod is fairly involved and will probably be the most challenging soldering work that I have ever done. Fingers crossed everything goes okay. This is also the most exciting mod since this will allow me to hook up my Dreamcast to my high-definition flat panel TV through HDMI and enjoy excellent video and audio quality. In addition, I'll be replacing the old shell with a brand new semi-transparent smoked one. I think that it's really going to look pretty sharp. The remaining mods will be consolidated into part 2. In that video, I'll be replacing the original power supply with a PicoPSU. This is a more efficient and cooler running power supply by virtue of the AC/DC transformer being moved outside of the console. Next, I'll be installing the Noctua Fan Mod, which will improve cooling of the console and more importantly, will reduce the overall fan noise. As you may or may not know, the Dreamcast is well known for its very, very loud fan. And last but not least, I'll install a GDEMU, which is an optical drive emulator allowing for the use of an SD card to store ROMs of your Dreamcast library. So as you can see, we have a lot of stuff we'll be doing to this Dreamcast. Now back to the focus of this video. As I mentioned before, I'll be installing the DCDigital kit and a brand new shell. As usual, I'm going to go over all the parts of each kit, show you the installation process, review the features and functionality of the mods, and then lastly, provide you with my overall thoughts and what I think. So let's dive right in and go over what comes in each kit. Starting with the DCDigital, here you have the main PCB, which takes in the native digital video and audio signals and outputs them via HDMI Mini. In essence, this is where all the magic happens. Also included are a couple nuts and bolts to secure the DCDigital PCB to the console itself. Next is this custom ribbon cable, which needs to be carefully soldered to the motherboard. This is what taps the digital video and audio signals. Now, this 3D printed jig is pretty cool. It's essentially a drill block that will help us make the opening in the shell for the HDMI port. It's really an ingenious design. Also included is this insulating film for the bottom of the DCDigital PCB to help prevent any potential shorts. And lastly is the Wi-Fi antenna, which will be used to update the firmware of the DCDigital whenever one is available. So that's the entire contents of the DCDigital kit. Now the most visible mod we'll be doing is replacing the original worn out shell with this brand new transparent smoked one. I bought this on eBay from a seller based out of Australia, and it appears to be really good quality. Okay, so that's everything I'll be using for part 1 of this ultimate Sega Dreamcast build. And without any further ado, let's get right into making this thing. Alright, you know the drill. Let's open this Dreamcast by removing the modem and the 4 Phillips screws in each corner. My Dreamcast is unfortunately missing 2 of those screws. Now you can remove the top shell. Before proceeding, let's quickly apply the insulating film to the DCDigital as shown. Back to the Dreamcast, remove the 2 Phillips screws securing the power supply and unplug it from the console. Now it can be removed along with the plastic insulator below. Next, remove the 3 Phillips screws securing the GD-ROM assembly. Then just yank it out. Unfasten the 4 screws securing the controller board and unplug both the ribbon cable and the fan cable, freeing the assembly. As you can see, I already upgraded the clock battery and fuse. Next, remove the 8 screws securing the top RF shield. Carefully lift and remove it from the console. Then remove the motherboard. Don't forget to remove these thermal pads. In my case, I'll be replacing them with new ones. And now you can remove the lower RF shield. Next, since we're replacing the shell, go ahead and remove both the fan and the power switch. Now we need to mod the lower RF shield. Trim this area shown here. File away any sharp burrs. Next, trim this long area around the back. Again, file away any burrs. I covered the edges with Kapton tape for added protection. With the new shell, trim this post near the back left of the console. And then this aligning nub shown here. This is what it should look like. Next, grab a 2mm or 3/32 inch drill bit, as well as the drill block. Place the drill block on the 5th vent hole from the right so that 4 holes are visible to the right of it. Then drill out the 3 holes. Flip the drill block over, then drill out the remaining 2 holes. Install the bottom RF shielding and place the DCDigital PCB on top. We can now see the area we need to file away. Carefully file away material until the opening is just large enough to snugly fit the HDMI port. With the PCB in place, we can now drill the holes for the securing screws. This time I'm using a 5/64 inch drill bit. Poke the screw through the bottom of the console, then fasten the nut and tighten. Now do the same with the other mounting point. And this is what it should look like. Next, plug in the antenna and set it aside for now. Modify the top RF shield by removing these areas shown here. And this is what it should look like. Again, I added Kapton tape for safe measures. And now comes the hard part. Let's start modding the motherboard by removing resistors R609 and R610 shown here. Be sure to clean up the area so that it's clean and flush. Next, add some extra solder to the negative side of capacitor CE308. This will make things easier later on. Now align the ribbon cable to the audio IC, with it beginning on the 4th pin from the right. Apply flux, and with no solder, tack it in place. There should be enough solder already on the pins. Next, align the cable with the video DAC and tack it in place. Again, there is no need for solder at this point since we're just aligning the ribbon cable for now. Now that everything is positioned, apply a small amount of solder to your iron tip and begin to fully solder the pins to the ribbon cable. Remember, flux is your friend. Also note that my iron temp is set around 315 degrees Celsius rather than my usual 340, since the ribbon cable is rather delicate and the pins don't need much heat. Key thing here is to take your time and inspect your work. Now go ahead and solder in the remaining points on the ribbon cable. Next, pre-tin these pads on resistor R601 and R602, then solder in a couple wires, each about 10 inches in length. Then tin the test pad next to IC206 and solder another wire here. I made each wire a different color so they're easier to track. I grouped the wires in shrink tubing to keep things tidy. Now we're going to solder these wires to the DCDigital PCB. The wire from R601 goes to P1, R602 to P2, and the test pad goes to RST. The extra green wire is optional for the GDEMU install I'll be doing later. Go ahead and reinstall the thermal pads. I'm using brand new ones. Then carefully insert the ribbon cable to the DCDigital and drop in the motherboard. Next, install the fan and power switch. Drop in the controller fascia and then the top RF shield. Don't worry about the screw hole that's covered by the ribbon cable. Go ahead and just fasten the remaining 7 screws. Then apply the antenna here. I'm using Kapton tape in case I need to remove it later to service the console. Install the controller PCB, then plug in the ribbon cable and the fan, then secure it with the 4 Phillips screws. Drop in the GD-ROM and secure it with the 3 screws. Install the power supply and fasten it in place with the 2 Phillips screws, and don't forget to plug it in. Now put on the top shell and flip the console over and fasten the 4 screws. Moving our attention to the modem, go ahead and remove the 2 screws securing the shell and separate it from the modem. Install it into the new shell and secure it in place with the same 2 screws. And lastly, insert the modem into the Dreamcast console, and we're done. Alright, I am so happy with how this came out and the fact that this thing is actually working. I have to say that the shell looks amazing and I'm really digging the smoked look. Also, the image quality is phenomenal. It's really something to see just how sharp the Dreamcast video output can be. But with that said, this is truly a challenging build. When I first installed the ribbon cable and tested the console, it was not outputting an image. I touched up my soldering work and now everything works perfectly. There was a moment when I thought I really messed things up. So bottom line, this mod is not for the faint of heart. If you are unsure of your soldering abilities, I highly recommend that you seek the help of an experienced modder. Alright, now before we get into what I think of the mod, let me give you a quick rundown of all the features of the DCDigital. Alright, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the DCDigital features and the in-game menu. That really, the way you activate it is you hit the two R triggers, Start, X, and A, and that'll bring up the DCDigital menu. So you'll actually just be using the L and R trigger to go back and to select, and the D-pad to go through the menu. So as you can see, we have a few things. We have output resolution, advanced video settings, scan lines, video mode settings, firmware, Wi-Fi setup, and test and info. Now, for me, the only things that I'm really interested in is output resolution. The scan lines are pretty interesting, and test and info, which is a very, very useful feature, especially right when you do the installation. So for output resolution, I'm going to hit the R, that'll select it. And as you can see, I'm in 1080p, so that's the signal that it's outputting. So I'm going to hit L to go back. We have scan lines. Now this is a pretty cool feature. Right now I have them off, but if I turn them on, you can see that the scan lines will turn on. And then intensity, I think that this darkens or lightens the scan lines. Again, not interested, but this is a really cool one, is you can switch whether or not you want them in odd or even lines. But yeah, so I don't know, some people might want to adjust that. And then the coolest one, I think, is the thickness of the scan lines. So right now it's thin, but then you got thick, which is really, really thick, and then you got very thin. And actually the very thin looks, in my opinion, pretty nice, and this is maybe something that I would keep on. But I'm not super interested in scan lines, so I'm gonna keep them off. And then last is the test info. And this is really great. So as soon as you're done installing the DCDigital, if you have a video signal, you can check to see if there's anything wrong with the installation. And as you can see here, you have the numbers there. You have the 0 through 11, and below each of those numbers is a heart. And that heart means that that aspect of the installation is good. Now, if you have an X below any of those numbers, I believe there's probably some sort of issue with the installation and you need to go back and you need to fix it. And I think that, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing that the numbers correlate to a part of the installation that is not correct and you need to remedy it. So again, a very cool feature, and I'm glad that this is included. So now that you're familiar with all the various options of the DCDigital's video output, let's do a side-by-side comparison of the image quality compared to an unmodified Dreamcast. The unmodified Dreamcast is using the original composite cables running through my RetroTink 2X Pro and into my Elgato HD60S Plus capture card. The DCDigital modded Dreamcast is set to 1080p and is also running directly into my Elgato capture card. And the quality is really just night and day. This is something that I've wanted to do for a while now, and I am truly impressed with the results. If you're thinking of doing this mod or getting someone to do it for you, I'd say do it. You won't regret it. Now moving over to the exterior of the console, the new shell is certainly worthy of this newly modified Dreamcast. The overall quality and build of this shell is nearly indistinguishable from the original. It's very high quality, and all of the components fit inside the console perfectly. The CD door opens and closes as it should, and it feels like it just came from the Sega factory. The metal Dreamcast badge on top is a really nice touch and adds to the premium feel of the overall product. All in all, I am extremely satisfied with the look and feel of this shell. Well, there you have it guys, part 1 of the ultimate Dreamcast build. What do you all think? Are any of you thinking about installing a DCDigital? How do you like the shell, and would you have gotten a different color from the one that I have? I always enjoy reading what you all think, so definitely leave me a comment below. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Macho Nacho Productions. I release content every Thursday, so be sure to turn on notifications. And as always, see you next time.